Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another segment of Feature Friday. Our special guest today is Martin McNair. So we appreciate you coming on and taking your time to speak with us today and be a special guest on this episode. You provided a bunch of education and spoke at our camp last summer, so we're totally excited to have you this year and have you speak with us today. So, carrying along with the interview, can you tell us about your mission and your Jordan Foundation?
Yeah. Thank you for having me. So, Ashley, let me tell you, last year I didn't come. So my team came up. So it was a couple of team members, and basically we had just came from the National Athletic Trainers Association show, and it was held in Philadelphia last year. And 3 years into it, I finally caught COVID. And that morning, that was on a Sunday, and that morning when we came up, I was like, when we got back to town, I'm like, I went to the gym. I really didn't feel well. Pushed through my workout, came home, took a home test, and it was like, I don't know. And then that evening, it just kind of hit me, and I'm like, I really don't feel well. And I was like, I'm gonna lay down. And one of my team members, he was saying, well, what do you want to do about tomorrow? And I'm like, bro, really, you and David can go up. That would be great. I appreciate it, man. And because I know we promised, Ron Johnson that we would come up,
Right.
and we were really excited about it as well. So I didn't even get an opportunity to make it, but my team came up. They represented, and the interesting thing was, I wound up getting the invite for Wellspan to be a keynote speaker at their medical sports conference a couple of months ago. So it turned out to be a good day. But who I am is I'm Marty McNair. I'm the founder of the Jordan McNair Foundation. And if anybody follows sports, especially college sports and football, my son Jordan was a young man that passed the University of Maryland back in 2018. He was a sophomore, and it was the very first day of football practice or conditioning drills. And he had a heat stroke on the field that day at practice. And unfortunately, nobody recognized it at the time. And they wound up getting Jordan to the hospital like an hour and 43 minutes later with a core body temperature of 106 degrees. So we went from a healthy kid Tuesday morning to an emergency liver transplant Friday morning with him being within hours of his life. Unfortunately, it was just so much damage done. The liver transplant wasn't enough really to save his life. So he passed on June the 13th of 2018. And man, our story and our lives have just changed. You couldn't have told me this prior to, this happening, that, we would be where we are in life right at this moment in our regards of, in our mission to advocate and really promote the awareness, education, and the prevention around heat-related injuries. I was the typical parent that basically I asked two questions. Can he play, and why isn't he playing? I didn't have an idea of any of the safety questions that should be priority questions long before whether your student athlete can play or not. And one of the things while Jordan was in the hospital fighting for his life those 2 weeks, his mom and I, Tanya and I, we just kept asking ourselves, like, what did we miss? What did we miss in the recruitment process? I asked two questions. I asked, can he get some playing time while, the coaches from the University of Maryland were sitting at our kitchen table. And I asked something around mental health and substance abuse support, just because, I had owned a facility in Baltimore City at the time. And that was pretty much the extent of my information. I just didn't know what I didn't know.
Right.
And, really one of the things that, another thing was I kept asking myself as a father, like, what didn't I prepare Jordan for? Because up until that point, I had really taught him, always be a leader, stand up for himself, always fight for yourself. And I never really taught him to, if his body told him to stop, always listen to his body. Or most importantly, if he felt uncomfortable around an adult or a coach asking him to do something he wasn't comfortable with, or he saw something that was going on with a teammate that he wasn't comfortable with, to speak up. And that really just kind of fueled our mission to where we are today.
Right. Well, my deepest condolences with you, but I'm glad you're taking action here to not only prevent this happening with other student athletes, but to teach others about just everything else, the other questions like you were referencing to ask, what to know, how to teach and educate not only yourself, but these student athletes as well when they go through with this process.
Correct. Yep. Thank you.
Of course. And you also mentioned how you're a keynote speaker and you travel around the country and speak at different conferences, clinics, events. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and the impact it makes on the audiences you speak to?
Yeah. So basically, what we do is, and it's funny because I've had this conversation probably 4 times, and I'll probably have it a couple of more times. One of the things that, like I told you, st- everything for us really was like a serious think tank while Jordan was fighting for his life those 2 weeks. And now, when I started to really, I had no idea what a heat stroke was. I just thought basically, if you had been in the sun too long, you just got to some shade and drank some water, and that was pretty much, you'd go home to your family that evening. I had no idea that when your core body temperature reaches above 104 degrees, that's the equivalent of your body being in a microwave oven. And the
Right.
longer it's in that oven, obviously, we put stuff in the microwave to cook or to heat up. And you literally have a 20 to 30-minute window to cool that core body temperature down, um, before the damage becomes irreversible. So I'm sorry, and let me go back because when I mentioned your initial question, when I was saying Jordan had to have an emergency liver transplant less than 3 days later. However, I forgot to say that 85% of Jordan's liver was necrosis. So 85% of his liver was dead from that hour and 43 minutes that it took to get him to the emergency room or the ER that day. So that'll let you know that he was in that microwave oven for that long, or his core, literally he was in there. So for me, really, the education piece was, or the education component is, I always remember when I would take Jordan all around the nation. He was 6'5", 300 plus pounds, a size 16 shoe. He was a lineman's lineman. So it wasn't a sports clinic or a combine, you name it, Under Armour, Nike, Adidas. Man, we've been to every single one because he was just that highly recruited. And one of the things that I realized was, what was the one thing that was always consistent? The one thing that was always consistent was all I ever did was sit in the stands with the other parents. I would have never known what a piece of safety equipment looked like, much less an emergency action plan or all the things that we educate and advocate for today. Nobody ever said anything. I mean, there was no parent education ever. So, here I am. Like, if I had known about certain things, I could have planted those seeds of self advocacy, listening to your body, all these types of things. I could have planted in him when he was a younger kid, when he was a younger student athlete, versus we're trying to figure it out on our own. So one of the things that we came up with, we do our annual clinic, and one of the things for me was early on, I never wanted parents to just sit and watch kids. Yeah, that's a part of the experience. However, I always felt there was a better use of time or a better use of a platform if we educated parents on what heat strokes look like, what cardiac arrest was, what all of the things that are tragic when it comes to sports that can happen just like that. And most importantly, one of the things that we always try to educate parents, coaches, and student athletes on is what a successful emergency action plan looks like. Because just think about it, Ashley, when you look at a football team, you usually have 105 kids, 105 guys on a football team. And even if you are, just say, a D1 school, I guarantee you may have 20 staff members, right?
Right.
Now, 20 to 5, 20 to 100, really that's almost like a 20 to 1 ratio or a 10 to 1 ratio, for lack of a better term. You agree?
Mhm.
So at the end of the day, you have to empower student athletes for them to know the signs and symptoms, because a lot of times they'll be the ones to save each other's lives in a sense. So throughout this whole process, I became an author. And, really to me, I kept saying, I want to write a book because I always felt like Marty McNair, the founder and author of the founder and author of the particular book that I wrote, which is Can My Child Play, always sounded better from a credibility perspective. So, again, like I think I thought kind of small with a lot of this stuff. So really, I never saw the bigger impact. I knew what I wanted to do, but
Right.
it gets bigger and bigger every day, just in regards to the platforms and everything that we work in. And, basically, when you look at coaches being educated, parents being educated, and student athletes being educated, as we say, the more educated everyone is, the safer everybody will be.
Right. And what you do is great. Like you said, planting those seeds, taking action. I myself am am in a EMS class right now learning
Right.
about everything, what's going on, how to treat these kind of situations, but also how to not freeze up in these kind of situations because I
Exactly.
had the proper training to
Exactly.
establish this. So what you're doing is great. And I just want to ask, what are some of the key takeaways you want your audience members to walk away with after you give your speeches or take away from your book?
Yeah. So I'm a big takeaway guy. So I'm glad you asked me that because a lot of times, most of the time when I speak, it could be 30 minutes to an hour in questions. And I
Mhm.
remember I was speaking at a student athlete, like a clinic, like a clinic at the end of 2022. And I was held my book up. And I remember one of the guys and one of the gentlemen who was in the audience said, his mom was so poor that even if she had the money, she couldn't have purchased my book, which was only like $25. But he was saying, what are some takeaways? And I thought about it like, you know what? Let me start giving takeaways. So one of the things, several of the takeaways that we always just depends on, what age group that we're talking to at that point. But you always want parents to really ask like the basic questions like, do you have an emergency action plan? Right. An emergency action plan is the equivalent of a fire drill. And basically, like now, I think everybody coming into 2023, we saw what happened in football. And what that was a well executed emergency action plan. They responded in the right amount of time. They had the right safety equipment there. And obviously, what that did was increase his chances for a successful recovery by almost 86%. Now, what happens in a lot of times when you look at parents or youth athletes, we start by asking or trying to plant the seeds as a parent. Ask these questions: do you have an emergency action plan? In the event something happens to my child, who's going to call me? Who's going to call 911? Who's going to go ahead and open the gate to let the EMTs in? Who's going to control the rest of the team? Who's going to ride in the ambulance with my child? Do you all have a AED machine? Do you have a cold water tub? Do you have a good first aid tent with the right safety equipment under it in the event of? And is it practice? Because as you just said, as an EMT, it looks very, very different. Theory based and practical based look totally different when something really happens. You can think that, oh, I'm supposed to go through these things. However, technically you are, but the more is practice. And guess what? When you have parents that are educated, guess they can hold coaches accountable. And I think for us, the big thing is for me, I'd always raised Jordan to be coachable. And that was one of, the only thing with Jordan, the only mistake he made, unfortunately, to his demise was he was a coachable teammate and he didn't want to let his team down. But at the end of the day, as parents, coachable means you're raising a robot. So if coach says, hey, run over that cliff or run through that brick wall, you're going to do it. I mean, at the demise or the behest of the person that's doing it. And at the end of the day, I try to emphasize to a lot of parents is that sports doesn't stop because an unfortunate incident happened to any student athlete on the field. So I'm really big on takeaways with the right questions to ask, the right safety equipment to look for on the field. And if you don't see the safety equipment, if everybody or the majority of people on the team that your child plays for doesn't have CPR certification or the right safety, life-saving certifications, maybe you should make a better decision in regards to where your child plays at.
Right. No, that's critical because even as a student athlete myself, I'm a senior now, I'm graduating, but it's like my underclassmen years, I didn't really think about it because you don't think about the bad things that can happen,
Right.
but we do have to be comfortable talking about stuff like this and to be prepared for situations because unfortunately they do happen, but
Yeah.
we would, like you're saying, want the highest chance of survival rate because we have to be prepared.
Correct. And preparation is always, preventive preparation is what saves lives, but again, everybody has to be educated to even know what those things look like in a sense. And that's really the most important thing that when we look at takeaways, if a parent, if you don't remember anything else, I always encourage them to obviously remember to plant the seeds of self advocacy early on and always ask those questions on what safety systems do you have in place and how often are they practiced in regards to in the event of something happening, because no parent wants to hear that, oh, we had something and unfortunately we didn't practice it. And the one common denominator that I consistently saw with deaths of student athletes since Jordan's passing was what's always the common denominator. It's either the lack of preparation with an emergency action plan, it's not practice, or they never even had one.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the preparation plan is super critical and everything. And like you said, making sure you have that plan, you know where the equipment is, you know how
Correct.
to address the situation.
Correct.
But you yourself, you also have developed a product to help save the life of younger athletes. Can
Yeah.
you tell us a little bit about this and
Yeah. Thank
how
you.
can and where like individuals, teams, or businesses can purchase this?
Yeah. So the interesting thing early on, our process actually was very organic, right? Because initially I always thought it was just about a cold water tub. If there had been a cold water tub on the field that day, Jordan would still be here and, all these things, right? So, I remember the first time I walked into a Tractor Supply store and saw a Rubbermaid cold water tub. And I was like, wow, this thing's only $159 for maybe a couple hundred, a 200-gallon tub. And I just was like, wow, like you can imagine my emotional frustration at the time because now don't get me wrong, if a tub was on the field that day, it would have made a big difference. However, but that goes back to the emergency action plan. If the emergency action plan was practiced, then the tub. So you can't just put the safety equipment there. You have to practice the EAP. That's the foundation of anything, whether it's a cold water tub, an AED machine, a wet bulb globe thermometer to test the temperature and the actual humidity levels and things like that. So in 2019, we just thought it was about the cold water tubs. And I'm like, you know what? I donated over 300 cold water tubs to programs literally from Alaska to Florida, right? And we had a inflatable tub, right? And this inflatable tub was I'm 6'1", and it would have been tough for me to fit in it, right? So as we donated all these tubs, it was a logistical challenge, but we got it done, right? And but one of the main things I kept saying, like, what about logistically? So if you have a stationary cold water tub, if you got an offsite game, right? Like, well, you can't take that big tub with you because
Right.
most people just kind of throw them under the bleachers or whatever the case may be until the following season. So I created a tub, a larger inflatable tub. And the interesting thing, I doubt you're probably old enough to remember this, but I remember as a kid, whenever we had a fire, we would always say stop, drop, and roll. That's Smokey the Bear. I don't even know if you remember that at all.
I know
But
exactly what it is. Promise
got it,
you.
got it. Smokey the Bear. So whenever there's a fire, stop, drop, and roll. But in the space of heat-related injuries, we always say cool first, transport second. Cool first, get a person in the ice, start cooling down, then call 911, right? Because again, we don't want to do call 911 first. So that's the catchphrase, cool first, transport second. So I invented a tub, inflatable tub that's large enough for a lineman that's 6'5", or two smaller athletes. That basically it's an inflatable tub. It's called the Cool First Transport Second solo tub, and basically we have a solo tub and the Cool First Transport Second team tub where you could put 3 or 4 athletes after a game. The interesting thing, and Ashley, let me emphasize, heat-related injuries aren't bad because they happen a lot more than you think. And it's not a scenario of you weren't hydrated. It's not this. You can be in peak condition and your body can still overheat. You can just be in the zone that day. That's just the nature of athletics. Whenever you're doing any type of repeat sprints, if you're not prepared or acclimated to the heat index or the environment, it can happen a lot quickly, prematurely. However, it can happen to anybody. I don't care what sport you're playing, anything. So it's not the fact that they're bad things. However, a lot of times the goal for us is to teach people to recognize the signs and symptoms of heat-related injuries. And if you catch heat exhaustion before it gets to heat stroke, guess what? That's a good day. And the more that's where, but when you get the heat stroke, that's when you're kind of like in the danger zone. But it'll be so many signs and symptoms prior to that: cramping, nausea, what we call central nervous dysfunction. A person could just appeared to be altered mentally, various signs that will tell you this person is in the danger zone.
Right.
And again, the more educated that, hey, I know you as a teammate. I may know you better than coach. So if you're kind of out of it, I can let somebody know to say, hey, Ashley doesn't look Well, so not to say again they aren't bad, but when they're mismanaged, that's when they become tragic.
Right.
So they aren't bad. I mean, heat-related injuries are that's a realistic part of sports. However, like I say, when they're mismanaged, that's when they become tragic. When you misidentify the signs or misdiagnose the symptoms, and obviously you can't get a kid with 106-degree core body temperature to the ER literally an hour and 43 minutes. That's a recipe for a tragedy in a sense. Yep.
Right.
So cool first, transport second .com. You can go ahead and order your tubs. Yeah, we have I think we have a special. You can buy both tubs for a discounted price. But the good thing is this: all you do is roll them up, you blow them up. They come with a pump and stuff like that. We got a really lot of great, neat videos demonstrating how to use the product, and it's usually probably me in the videos. So I'm the one jumping in the ice baths and everything for sure.
That's perfect. But I think the whole process about how you went about this too, the cool first, transport second, it's simple instructions, it's
Correct.
memorable, it goes along with the product. So I think that was very clever, not only in a marketing aspect, but just actually how to react during the situation. So kudos to you. I mean,
Hey,
that's
thank you so
awesome.
much. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you so
And
much.
then
Yep.
if anybody else has any more additional questions or wants to become more educated in this, is there any way they can reach out to you or look up
Yeah,
anything
please.
to?
You can reach me. You can reach us at our social media sites. But I always encourage everybody to go to the Jordan McNair Foundation.org. And basically, like that's where all of our stuff is. Just pick a drop down box where you need help with legislation, you need help with education, clinics, all types of stuff, and we basically, our main focus is, we educate people at all levels. So like if parents are they have student athletes at the collegiate level, they're ready to go to the collegiate level. We have a piece of education for them at the high school level, at the AU level, the youth level. Basically, we speak to a variety of parents at different levels. Even with student athletes, we do the same. Coaches, we do the same. So we have a really, really great curriculum, multiple curriculums, just at depending on what level that you may be at, in the sense where your student athlete may be in their career or just their process. And most importantly, I always encourage everybody, hey, purchase a copy of Can My Child Play? The Questions We Should Have Asked. And I guarantee you, it's something in there for every family that will change your life and make you look at the reality of student athlete safety.
That's very important and it's a realistic topic.
Yep, for sure.
But I sympathize with you, but I also commend you for going out and doing something about it as well to help
Great.
other student athletes, other families avoid this. So 100%, thank you so much for everything and all this useful information. I
Sure.
myself am going to look into this more
There you go.
because that's all we can do is be educated, be prepared for
Yep.
something like this. But I appreciate your time. I appreciate all the information, not only that I received today, but everybody viewing is going to see
Okay.
and can't wait to work with you.
Yep. Looking forward to it. Thanks again, Ashley. Have a
Thank
great day.
thank you. Have a good
Okay.
one.
All right. Bye bye.